those are the main strategies that I have to give to you. Now I'm going to do a couple of pitfalls that I've experienced both with me, my friends back when I was in high school, and some of the students that I tutor right now. And that is studying the wrong way. Because at the end of the day, studying is a time and energy commitment, and you want to be using that time and energy effectively instead of wasting it. So, the amount of times that I've seen people who just rewrite notes over and over again, hoping that it like converts to your brain for muscle memory, that can help for certain people in certain subjects. But ideally, that's not going to work in the long run for everything, especially for something like maths. Just because you rewrite a formula time and time again doesn't mean that you know how to use it in a complex, unfamiliar question that requires five other formulas alongside it. So be smart about the way that you are revising and make it subject specific. Don't just study the same way for all of your subjects because it's not going to be as effective. Um, and of course, our favorite thing to go through, burnout. Now that all of you have sort of finished doing your mocks, I presume, especially after the actual week of mocks being completed, I'm sure you would have felt pretty burnt out in regards to your motivation. That's a really, really dangerous mindset to get yourself into because once the burnout starts, if you don't find a way to keep yourself motivated, it's extremely hard to get out of that like run down, exhausted mindset. So, unfortunately, tips for dealing with burnout aren't too universal. Like each person sort of deals with it in a different way because burnout can happen in different ways. Burnout could be that you're overworking yourself and you're not getting enough time to look after your well being. Burnout could be that you've spent all of this time studying something ineffectively and you thought you'd known it going into the external mocks, and then your paper's back and you've gotten bad marks. And then what do you do then? So, in order to keep up motivation, again, this works different ways with different people, but what I like to tell my students is when you're starting, especially following the first couple of weeks after mocks, take it easy. Don't jump into, other external papers and then waste them and deplete your resources before getting up to the externals. You want it sort of to be a steady incline. So that can be something like starting off for maths, for example, writing down all of the calculator instructions for your topics is a good way to start because it's so brainless. You just have to flip through the textbook and then write down all of the buttons or the calculator guide alternatively. If you are somebody who is struggling to use that graphics calculator, if you're a methods or specialist students, um, there's a YouTube channel that does QCE like targeted. I think it's Joel Speranza's YouTube channel. Um, Check him out. He does like um external paper breakdowns for all of the QCE papers. He's a fantastic man who's done so much for QCE students everywhere. But because it's so brain dead, you're not actually exhausting yourself, but it is going to help you in the long run for externals because knowing the calculator instructions is going to make your tech-free exam more efficient. The same thing can be said for things like English and literature. If you're feeling just not up to like reading through or writing another essay, sit down and write out some quotes or sit down and look at some stylistic and aesthetic features. Watch video essays on Macbeth. So it's literally like you're, scrolling through YouTube. For biology, same thing. Watch videos explaining the topics that you need to do. So you're not explicitly learning it, you're just watching somebody explain it to you. Try and make things easy for yourself instead of more mentally straining because you want to save up your mental capacity to the time that it counts. Just on top of that, and like do as I say and not as I do, because I was guilty of doing this a lot in high school. Make sure that you are eating properly and sleeping and drinking water, exercising, hanging out with friends, spending time with family, and living your life as normally as you would be able to. Because if you're locking yourself up and not interacting with anybody, it's very hard to just get stuck in that mindset and for it to spiral um like constantly. try and make studying a social thing as much as you can, because it's much easier to avoid burnout, or it's much easier to come back from burnout, I should say, if you're enjoying your study. And a good way to do that is with doing it with people that you like as well. So, I hope this is helpful for you guys. If you do have any other questions, about, avoiding burnout that might be a bit more specific, or just how to sort of start study for like some specific subjects, please pop them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer. Obviously, my subjects combination might be very different to yours, but I will try my hardest. Pop them in if you do have any. All right. Another little thing to avoid is being non-specific with your goals as well. I touched on this a little bit earlier when I was talking about Pomodoro, but when you sit down for a study session, or when you sit down for a revision session, you don't want to not have a goal by the end of the session. So whenever I sat down, this was in the very early stages as well in grade 12. Sometimes I would just put into my calendar, like, from 5 to 6 p.m., you're going to study biology. And then I would get to 5 to 6 p.m. and I'd be like, well, what do I do? And I kind of would just um, open the lessons that we had just done in that week in class and like go through them very superficially. Um, and then half the time I would be like scrolling through my phone or getting up and, getting snacks or something unproductive. If you want to be successful with your study sessions, start with a goal and then finish the study session when that goal is achieved. Um, so again, with Japanese, for example, if I did a study session, I would maybe take like 1 hour, 5 to 6 p.m. as an example, and I would be like, review all kanji from chapters 3 to 5. And by review, I mean I need to leave that study session being able to do the kanji and write some keywords with them at the end of the hour. So I would be able to go to chapter 3, 4, and 5, write them all down, get acquainted with their meanings. Kanji are the script characters, by the way, for people not doing Japanese. I would be able to write them all down in my notebook. I would be able to practice the stroke order, and then I would practice using them in sentences or in words, and make sure that I knew all of the vocab words that related to those particular script and character. And then once the study session was finished, I would reflect back and say, do I know these off by heart? If I do, it's a successful study session. If I don't, maybe add it onto a study session at a later date. Always reflect on your goals at the end of the study session as well, because it keeps you thinking about what you know and what you don't know, and overall improves your effectiveness. Same thing with maths. Like, instead of going, okay, I'm going to review Unit 3 maths, I'm going to specifically do chapter 15G, question 9 to 15. And then I'm going to mark chapter 15G, question 9 to 15, and calculate how many marks I would have gotten. It's when you set super, super specific goals that are targeted and things that you can actually say, like, yes, I did, or yes, I didn't do, is your study going to be effective. So yeah, before going into marks, set a realistic expectation of what you want your mark to be for all of your subjects. And remember, this mark is going to be different from person to person. So when you start talking to people, like if you're in study groups with other people, when you're talking to friends, don't make the mistake of comparing their goals to your goals as well. Just trying to think of what to say off of that. At the end of the day, your mocks and your externals are an experience that is unique to you. So make sure that you're doing yourself the service of planning ahead. Now, what I have here as well is this little website called Future Me that you can use to write letters to yourself. So now that we're about a month from externals, I didn't actually do this for myself in grade 12, but I've told some of my students to do this if you need a little extra kick of motivation. This is one of those websites that lets you write a letter and automatically send it or emails it to you. At the end of today, if you've got any time after this, oh, it's not what I wanted. And this can be any kind of letter you want. This could be a letter like that's motivational, like, a final words of encouragement from yourself. The day before your external exams. This could be like a catch up or like a reminder thing, being like, oh, you've got your exam tomorrow. Remember that really stupid question you got wrong today? Don't get it wrong in the external. And then send it to, don't go public about it on this. Send it, choose a date for you to deliver and an email, and it will send it to your email for that day that you send it to. So if you wanted to give yourself a word of encouragement just before each of your exams, it's something to look forward to receiving. And if you completely forget about it, it would be a really nice surprise come your external day. So that's something guys consider as well. Just to improve, motivation and your feelings about your exams in general. Oops, sorry. Let me get back slides. There we go. So yeah, be specific about your goals, be specific about your expectations, and be a little bit kind to yourself too. Okay. Now, this slide is kind of going to be a little bit not too useful to you if you've already done your mocks, but if you have done them, do a little reflection using this checklist and see what your experience was like while you were in them. So number one, make a note of your timing and know your vocabulary as well. And what I say by that is, if you find that you're being extremely time pressured in a mock exam, maybe that's a sign to reflect on how you're approaching the exam in general. So for example, if I'm feeling very time pressured during a maths exam and my approach to doing the maths exam was just start at the start and then go until I finish, that can be easily changed. During your reading time, make a note in your head about the questions that you think would take up the most time or would be the most difficult. And again, this works for some students. Choose to start with them first. So once you have the easy stuff, done and dusted, once you have the hard stuff done and dusted, you can breeze through the easy stuff with a lot less to think about in terms of time pressure. Same thing with English. English, usually the timing is pretty okay. And then even with like the languages, because you've got audio files to listen to, how are you going to structure listening to the audio file whilst having a writing task to do, and etc., etc. Second thing, know your vocabulary. Each of these questions in the external exam starts with a question heading consisting of a cognitive verb. And basically, if you look on the QCEE like glossary, each of those cognitive verbs has a different meaning as to how you're supposed to answer a question and the amount of detail that you're required to get full marks. If you don't know the exact meaning of those verbs when you encounter them in the external, you could run yourself into a bit of hot water by not answering the question properly. So know your vocabulary really, really well. For maths and science, see if you can see if there were any differences in your experiences between multiple choice and short response, and then paper 1 versus paper 2 as well. Is there one that you're better off starting first so you can get it over and done with? Well, obviously you can't really do that for paper 1 and paper 2, but for paper 1, have a think about it. Sorry, feeling tired myself. Paper 1 and paper 2, and reflect whether or not it'll be easier to do it in a different order. Obviously, don't just try that new order in the external. Use the time between mocks and externals to trial and error different kinds of exam approach strategies and see which one works the best for you. For humanities, pay attention of the organization of your papers on the test, the timing for each of the writing segments. Have you got time for the extended source analysis that you're planning to do? Write down a small list of important key dates as well related to the topic that you're studying to remember for historical contexts and for history subjects, just so you've got them readily available to you and accessible to you. For languages, this is a really funny story that I'm about to say, but pay close attention to what language you're supposed to be writing in. Because a couple years ago, the mock exam that QCEE had given the first half of the paper to be responses in English. So if it was like purpose, context, like paragraphs that you had to write in English, and then the second half of the paper you had to do in Japanese, in script itself. That was for the mock. For the actual external, the first couple of questions you had to write in Japanese script. The English questions came in the middle of the paper, and then the final part of the paper was the extended writing task that's supposed to be in Japanese. And so many people got tripped up in the external and switched the languages over. So they wrote all of the original questions in English and the final questions in Japanese, even though it was supposed to be the other end. So pay very, very close attention to what language you're supposed to be writing in. This was something that I've just done like for years now, but whenever you're doing study and whenever you're doing mocks, use the same equipment. Like for each of my subjects, and I still do this in uni, I use the same pen during notes and like revision and exam practice as I would in the real thing. I don't know if it's a placebo thing, I don't know if there's muscle memory associated with it, but I just think it helps with like association wise. And also just be respectful to your teachers who are marking your mocks. They are aware that most of you are not going to be taking them too seriously. It is a mock exam after all, but try and answer every question, or I hope all of you have tried to answer every question on the exam. And when you get your exam papers back, make sure that you're being respectful of your teachers going through the exam paper, and use them to clarify any doubts that you may have, because the more respectful you are to them, the more willing they're going to be to help you as well. So hopefully you would have done all of those things. If not, pause the recording and actually do a reflection of each of these points for all of your externals. I know from my own experience, one of the things that really surprised me was during the English mock. Up until then, like even for our internal assessments, the paper that we were writing on was just regular, like standard line paper. If you open a, faint ruled notebook, just the blue lines and everything like that, that's what we were using up until then. But then in the mocks for English, they had given us the proper external writing paper booklet. And for some reason, the line spacing really, really threw me off for the booklet because the lines were so spread apart. And in my head, I know that I have to, with my handwriting size and my spacing for like between my words and everything, I can get away with about 4 pages to be 1,000 words. 4.5 usually can be 1,000 words for me. But when I saw the line spacing of the mock like paper booklets, it really threw me off because I now didn't know how many pages I needed to write to be on 1,000 words. And the entire time I was sort of thinking at the back of my head, like, what if I don't meet the word limit? What if I go over the word limit by a crazy amount? Which is such a, like looking back, it was such a pointless problem to have because I could have just, done more practice. But that was something that I know definitely threw me in the deep end when it came to my English mock. And then the way that I overcame that is I printed out the like sheets of the mock exam booklet from the QCEE website that has those lines for the English test booklet, and I did all of my practice essays on the booklet. So I knew exactly how many pages I needed to write for 1,000 words. It was about 5 because the line spacing was so spread apart compared to normal line paper. Again, super random thing, but it definitely helped me because I didn't need to stress about word count in the final external.